So this Barclays Center NBA deal, how did that come about? That's such an interesting pairing.
They called us. They were interested in doing a live show with us and pitched the doubleheader scenario, and it sounded good to us, so we figured we'd give it a shot. Largest market in the world, and why not?
And you all have had a lot of success with your live shows. How do those differ from the podcast that you all do each Friday?
Well, it's a lot of, we kind of promote it as the stuff that you can't tell on the podcast and the little more inside stuff, but it's also a Q&A from the audience as well. So we've got a lot of interaction from the audience, but for the most part, it's the maybe a little more risque content sometimes. That's kind of hard to believe, but yeah.
And I know that you'll be appearing on Raw 25 just a couple days after that. Tell me how that comes about.
Man, I just got the phone call. I'll believe it when I see it, and then they asked it to be a surprise. But next thing I know, I'm getting bombarded with messages on my phone saying, hey, it's great. You're going to be back on Raw. And I'm like, what? So they announced it. So I guess it's really happening, man.
So who makes the phone call to you for that?
A gentleman in the office, just, I guess, someone with talent relations, real nice guy, Ben Brown. And we had a nice chat, and that was about it.
So did you expect that? I mean, obviously your podcast is wildly successful. But, I mean, you have not exactly minced words about some people that you had poor experiences with. And, of course, you've put over stuff that you did enjoy and did have good experiences with. But, I mean, it's not like you're talking like all rainbows and sunshine on your show all the time.
No, and I didn't expect the call. I really and truly didn't. I was flattered by the call and looking forward to going back and doing it and seeing everybody. I had a great run. I had a really good time in the WWE, so I look back on it fondly. I choose to remember the good times and the fun and kind of reflect on that as much as I can.
When was the last time you've been in the Manhattan Center?
The last show that we ran there, so that was a long time ago.
So it'll be split between Barclays and the Manhattan Center. It's really a unique dynamic that they're doing. So you got this call for Raw 25. Vince McMahon has to be aware of your show, right?
I would hope so. Yes, he is. Yeah, he's definitely aware of it.
Have you heard of any perhaps reaction of anything you've said about him or your impersonations or anything? I'm sure he's probably also heard your impersonation of him well before the podcast.
Well, every caricature, I like to call them, that I've done, I think I've done to everyone's face. So it's not like it's not like something that I haven't done for many years and to them. So it was, Vince has heard it plenty of times.
Also, last year you had this run with Impact Global Force Wrestling. When you got into that, did you kind of know it was going to be short term?
Well, Jeff Jarrett and I talked about it from the beginning, and we kind of looked at it as, let's see how this thing goes. And if Jeff were still in charge there, probably would still be doing stuff. But at the same time, my schedule, my live event schedule, and everything else that I was doing started to conflict a little bit with the television taping schedule that Impact had. So it kind of worked out for the best for everybody in that I did my last appearance for them in August, and I was going to miss a ton of those tapings afterwards. So the convenience of firing me on air was right there. And I was like, let's go for it. Let's make it make sense for them, and I can kind of move on my merry way.
Was there any type of, I don't want to say heat, but what was the reaction like when you walked back in that, not locker room, but that backstage area after you did 2 pretty lengthy podcasts on them, bearing all about your experiences there?
Absolutely positive on all fronts. So I was shocked and also happy to learn how many people were listening to the podcast. So I was happy about that. But for the most part, it was positive. They one of the reasons they even asked me back was because of the success of the podcast. So that helped. And, coming back in, I think that a portion of my audience was going to come and check out what I was doing on TV there for Impact and vice versa. So, pretty much I was welcomed back with open arms, and it was a good experience. It was probably the easiest gig I've ever had in the wrestling business, because my only responsibility was for my performance.
I
didn't have to worry about everybody else.
Yeah, I was going to ask what all you did there, if they had you involved in anything behind the scenes, or if you were strictly an on-air character.
I was strictly an on-air character. I did go to the production meetings, and from time to time they would ask my opinion on things, of which I was happy to give. But for the most part, it was an on-air character. I had my script, if you will, of what they wanted me to do, and I had freedom to interpret it how I wanted to interpret it and take it from there. So in that regard, I would show up when it was time to go to work, and I would kind of disappear and do my day job, if you will. And then when it was time to go, head out, do my stuff, go back to the hotel. So it was easy in that regard, and a lot of fun, because I just got to enjoy being a talent and enjoy being around people without having to worry about contracts and everything else.
When was the last time you were able to do that? Because you had been involved in production, you had a hand in a little bit of everything during your time, talent relations. Had you ever just simply performed as a performer without any additional duties?
No.
Wow.
I never really thought of it. No, never have.
Man, that's what an incredible change that is. Has your show mended fences with anybody from your past, or maybe even caused rifts and stuff? I know personally, I got a phone call from Vince Russo, and I encouraged him to do your live show when you did the podcast about him. And they can cause problems if people think you're doing a show about them. And even if you spent 2 hours saying positive things, if you spent 10 seconds saying one negative thing, they could possibly take exception to that. Have you ran into that at all or extensively during your show?
Very little, and Russo was the main one that took exception to things that we said. And the funny thing about that was we simply used his book, his own words. And I don't know how you can be more fair than that. And he got upset over it, and I talked to him about it. I talked to him about it afterwards. When he called, I picked up the phone. He asked me to do a show, and I wasn't interested in doing that because I had done his show in the past. And we also used the excerpts from the show I had done with him in the past, where he had talked about how Jim Ross and I basically came up with the idea to put Rock in the Nation of Domination and all that good stuff. And we reminisced about all that. And then in the book, it was different. I guess he's done something different since then. And I just said, I don't have any desire to go tit for tat with anybody. My show is my recollections, my stories, how they affected me. You have your show, you talk about how things affected you. And if you see it differently, go and express that on your show. That's your prerogative. I don't do guests. We try to make it a fun show. We try to make it entertaining and have fun with the damn thing. And I'm not out to bury anybody, really to the contrary. Just go out and tell some different stories from a perspective that I don't feel has ever been shared before.
Yeah, I had told him I thought that him showing up for your live show would have been a great career move, because I couldn't imagine you and Conrad ambushing him or anything with with anything in front of a crowd. I couldn't imagine them being anything but fair in that situation. Well,
that was the other thing, and going back to even the show was he had reached out and all these different things, and Conrad invited him. Conrad offered to pay him, to pay his trans, get him there, hotel trans and everything. And even offered, he goes, you know what? He goes, we'll give you 100% of the ticket sales sold beyond this point if we announce that you're going to be there. And then, there was every excuse in the book. Well, it's Father's Day. Well, I've got family. Well, I've got this. I can't do that. You're a mark because you're working on Father's Day. I'm like, okay. Nobody called you names. Nobody did any of that. If you'd like to come on, we'll have some fun.
Also, you had mentioned that Undertaker, you'd seen him recently. How do you think he's like factoring into WWE these days? He's going to be at Raw 25 too. Is that someone you're looking forward to running into?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody, but I did have the good fortune of seeing Taker over the Thanksgiving holidays, and some bitch looked better than I've seen him look in years. So I was happy to see that, and it's he likes to play things close to the vest, and I truly believe that in his mind and in his heart, he's had his last match, but there's always that doubt, and I've always been one to try and tap into that doubt in the past. Say, come on, you got one more or 20, to get him back and to get him thinking. But right now, man, watching him run up the steps when I saw him the other day, I was like, damn, you're moving better than you've ever moved. So it was great to see him. And for me, I say never say never. So
yeah,
I don't think we've seen his last match.
So as we wrap up the last couple of things, you all handle a lot of topic-based stuff, whether it's an event, a wrestler, whether it's a certain era, things like that. I talked to you a couple of years ago about a feature I did for the Brawl For All. And when I went back and watched it, I had forgotten how, like, especially with the emergence of UFC, like how rough some of this stuff could get. Is there any particular topic that you and Conrad have covered that you just, like, in retrospect, you're like, wow, that's way worse than I remembered, or that's way better than I remembered?
Some of the pay-per-views that I've gone back and I watched on both sides, where I thought, wow, I remember this was a great show, but it didn't hold up over time. And then there were those, I don't remember this show, and then watching it going, man, what a great show. So there've been a few of those back and forth, but I think that going back, and the Brawl For All was something that I just hated. And I don't think that holds up over time at all. I think it just gets worse because you're looking at it, and the viewpoint of the talent even then was just, it's skewed even more so because of the outcome of the thing.
Sure.
And how so many guys got hurt. It was kind of like the curse of the Brawl For All.
Yeah.
That if you won or you did well or anything good came out of it, but Doc got hurt, Savio got hurt, everybody. I mean, God, everybody in the damn thing got hurt.
As I looked back, like Steve Blackman and Dan Severn were in the first rounds, and they looked, even in retrospect, very good, very technically sound. They, Dan Severn had that great background, and when I've talked to Ken Shamrock, he's told me that Steve Blackman probably stood the best chance of beating him in a shoot fight than almost anybody he's worked with. But then I see some of the other guys, and I'm like, oh man, this is tough. And
Blackman didn't want to hurt Mark Merrow.
Yeah, took him down over and over again.
So he just kept taking him down.
Golden Gloves boxer in Merrow.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't a slouch or anything, but
right.
You could tell he had never really had to defend like a single leg or a double leg or anything like that. And after this, Butterbean, like, kind of made it like a novelty of his to beat pro wrestlers. Like, I don't know if you knew that in MMA he beat Sean O'Hare, he beat Aaron Aguilera. Like, he was fighting pro wrestlers for a while, so he kind of made a little thing of it.
Yep, and well, he could, because he was a snug boxer, man, and he had a great punch. But it just it wasn't. I keep going back, and the analogy Shamrock says, Shamrock and Severn both, they had everything to lose and nothing really to gain from the Brawl For All. And I understood, I definitely understood Kenny's stance on why would I do that. I can go back to MMA and go back to UFC and make a lot more off of one fight.
Sure.
This does nothing for me. And then to put the gloves on him, he felt would really hamper him. But Blackman just went out, and it was almost kind of fun to Steve, I think. Go out, just take him down, play with him, take him down, play with him, and be done.
this is a little out of left field, but right after he left WWE, were you all aware of Ludvig Borga's MMA run and how poorly he did in it?
Yes.
What was the thought about that, like backstage or among you or anybody?
Why?
0-4.
Well, the thing is, Shamrock is an anomaly in my opinion, and probably Dan Severn too, because they were Ken was a pro wrestler, but Ken also wrestled. Ken has a background, and Ken did UFC and Ultimate Fighting and things of that nature before he came back and really made it in pro wrestling. So I think coming from the MMA world into the professional wrestling world is a little bit easier transition than doing it the opposite way, kind of like Brock did, because in the professional world, you are used to working and not hurting your opponent and not going all out. So it's just a different mindset that you have to get yourself into. Shamrock was successful on both fronts. Obviously, Brock Lesnar, tremendously successful on all fronts. Dan Severn as well. But, CM Punk didn't fare as well. Ludvig Borga, I just don't know what he thought. I think that Ludvig had people in his head telling him, oh, you're the toughest guy in the world. You're the toughest guy in the world. You're going to go out there. I mean, he had a boxing career. He did the MMA, and unfortunately failed miserably at all of those.
He ran into a debuting Randy Couture.
Yeah.
Too. That doesn't help.
No.
Yeah, when I talked to Ken Shamrock about it, he said that it bothered him a little bit because he had just kind of gotten used to not hurting people in the ring and like gaining people's trust, and now he was being asked to do the opposite. So, like, I could kind of understand that. Tell people where they can get tickets for this upcoming show at Barclays.
Boxofgimmicks.com, and tickets start at only $35. Blows my mind because you get an NBA game with the Brooklyn Nets against the Miami Heat, and then right after that you get our show live, and we'll also have VIP tickets available, but they're all available at boxofgimmicks.com this Friday night, January 19th at Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
Definitely encourage everybody to check that out, and your podcast in general. I got to say, my favorite story of all that you've told is the Bob Holly story, where his great idea was to beat everybody and give him the belt.
I got an idea. Give me the belt.
That was
I just beat everybody.
Fantastic
I love Bob.
stuff. Fantastic stuff. Bruce, thank you so much.